Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, we have at least 6 new Hall of Famers going into the Hall of Fame this next summer, and at least 2 of them are currently still alive as of right this moment. So we're going to be talking about Hall of Fame Veterans Committee selections. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. I am Jeff Snider of Baseball Essential, and this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Vince and I are doing a split episode, so he'll be with you for the second half of this show. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. This is the daily podcast covering the world champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. And as I said, there were 6 new inductees into the Hall of Fame on Sunday. The 2 veterans committees, the Early Days Committee and the Golden Era Committee, they had their elections. The Golden Era Committee elected 4 players, and the Early Days Committee elected 2 players. I think by my math, the most that any committee could elect would probably be about 5. And so getting 6 out of the 10 possibilities is pretty impressive. There have been some rough years where they haven't elected anybody or only elected 1 or 2. And so it's nice to get 6 deserving candidates in. On the Early Days Committee, the 2 inductees were Bud Fowler and Buck O'Neil. I'm going to talk a lot about Buck O'Neil a little bit later. I'm not going to talk much about Bud Fowler because I don't know a lot about him. What I do know about him, he was a Negro Leagues player, and a lot of people whose opinions I really respect say that he is a very deserving inductee. So that's good enough for me. A little bit of behind the scenes stuff. This is my second time recording my half of this episode because the first time I did it, my microphone did not get picked up. So I'm going to, maybe second time's a charm. Maybe I'll do a good job this time. Who knows? And for all you know, I am just, I did a great job on the first try. So the Golden Era Committee, we're going to talk first about the Dodgers connections. And the big one is Gil Hodges. Gil Hodges was finally elected. It's been almost 50 years since Gil Hodges died. And because of that, it creates kind of a lack of urgency sometimes. If you listened or watched my episode with Adam Dorowski from Baseball Reference a week or 2 ago, we talked about how once a player has passed away, there's less of an urgency because there is kind of an urgency to get some of these guys elected while they are still alive. Unfortunately, we talked about this a little bit last year when Dick Allen died because we knew that Dick Allen would be up for election this year. And so it was a bummer that he died before getting a chance to see himself elected. Now, I almost said that it wouldn't have mattered because he wasn't elected this year either, but I do believe that Dick Allen would have been elected this year if he was still alive. And I'll talk more about the 2 living candidates that they did elect in just a minute. But for Gil Hodges, Adam and I weren't super optimistic about Hodges' chances just because it seemed like that urgency wasn't there because he has been dead for almost 50 years. And maybe Vince Scully kind of put out a campaign, explaining why he thinks Gil Hodges deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And maybe that pushed people over the edge, but Hodges got in, which is great news for everybody. It means the Dodgers will retire Gil Hodges number 14 next year. And it'll be nice to add a number to that retired number list. 14 is an interesting one. It's been, most notably, Kike Hernandez wore it most recently through 2020. Nobody wore it in 2021. Mike Scioscia wore number 14 for his entire Dodgers career. Maybe, I don't know if he may have worn a different number as a rookie. I don't know, but he was number 14 when I was growing up. Dan Herron wore it. There've been in all 22 players have worn number 14 for the Dodgers since Gil Hodges did. And that's what it's a term that I coined a couple of years ago is the retired number bandit, somebody who wears a number, a retired number after the person for whom it is retired. And so Gil Hodges will have 22 retired number bandits, which is a pretty high number. I actually wrote about 40,000 words a few years ago about all the retired number bandits in baseball history for all the teams. So, if you're in the mood to read 40,000 words about retired numbers, it's kind of interesting, I guess. I thought so. I thought it was interesting enough to write it anyway. But 22 retired number bandits would be close to the record. I didn't look, but I don't think it's quite the record, but it's a lot of retired number bandits. And so it'll be nice for Gil Hodges' number to finally be retired. I wouldn't be surprised if the Mets retire his number at some point too, because he was their manager when they won their first World Series. And, he's well known and beloved with Mets fans, and the fact that, most Mets fans of that era had been Brooklyn Dodger fans. And so Gil Hodges was already beloved. So he's very popular in New York and in Los Angeles. And so he may get a couple number retirements soon. I mentioned Dick Allen didn't get in. It's a bummer. He fell 1 vote short. I think Minnie Miñoso had 14 votes. You needed 12 out of the 16 to get in. Dick Allen finished with 11. Second time in a row that he's been 1 vote shy of election. And maybe if one of those Miñoso voters had changed their vote to Dick Allen, maybe they would have got 5. But, 4 is really good. The two living players who got elected from the Golden Era Committee were Jim Catt and Tony Oliva. Jim Catt is a really interesting case. He played for 25 years. He was never great, but he was good for a long time. And he was legitimately great at fielding. He had 16 Gold Glove Awards as a pitcher, which is just ridiculous. And he's kind of an interesting case of which version of WAR you look at. If you're looking at wins above replacement, I've talked before about how frustrating it can be that there are multiple versions of WAR. There's like 3 different versions, and 2 that are actually called WAR. Baseball Perspective calls theirs WARP, wins above replacement player. So it's slightly different, but according to Baseball Reference, Jim Catt was around 45 WAR, which is like just starting to approach the borderline. It's right around the place of Gil Hodges, and I would guess it's right in that ballpark of guys who get elected by a veterans committee. But it's not a shoe-in, definitely not inner circle. But Fangraphs had him at 70.9 WAR, which is basically a shoe-in. It's still not inner circle, but it's this guy's clearly a Hall of Famer. And so I don't know if Fangraphs does a better job of incorporating his defense into his WAR, or if it actually has to do with his actual pitching numbers, the underlying numbers. I don't really know for sure, but Fangraphs has thought he was a Hall of Famer for a while. Baseball Reference maybe isn't so sure, but the voters are sure. And so Jim Catt is now a Hall of Famer, which is great. He's still alive to enjoy it. And he's been, he's one of those guys who, if you say the name Jim Catt, if you've heard of him, you probably, he's already a Hall of Famer. He's been around forever. He's been a broadcaster. He still is. Jim Catt, excited for him. Tony Oliva is another one I'm really excited about. He played for 15 years, but really it was more like 9 or 10. He had less than 7,000 plate appearances. So really less than 10 seasons worth of plate appearances. His career was cut very short by several different severe injuries. He did play the last couple of years as a DH, but even that got to be too much. And so his career was cut short, but while he was playing, he was an outstanding hitter. He played for the Twins in the 60s and 70s alongside Rod Carew, and they were very similar type hitters. Oliva had a little bit more power than Carew. Other than that, and Carew was probably a better hitter. No doubt about it. Carew was a better hitter, but they were very similar and outstanding teammates. They were roommates. They were both from outside the U.S. Carew was from Panama. Oliva's from Cuba. Very close friends. And, there was 8 years in a row that Oliva was an all-star and got MVP votes. He was Rookie of the Year his rookie year. So just outstanding player whose career was cut short. And again, his career WAR is 43. But if you figure that's in, 10 seasons worth of plate appearances, take that out to 15 seasons, and suddenly he's over 60 WAR, and that's starting to think Hall of Famer. So I'm super excited for Tony Oliva. I've always had a soft spot for him because I grew up looking at my dad's baseball cards, and that was right in my dad's era. And so a lot of Tony Oliva cards. If I remember right, his first year or two, he was called Pedro Oliva on his cards, which is weird because his middle name was Pedro, according to Baseball Reference anyway. So I don't know why he was listed as Pedro Oliva. I should have looked that up, but I was busy doing research about Minnie Miñoso's name, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. But so I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about Minnie Miñoso. I'm going to talk about Buck O'Neil. Yeah, I think I talked about everybody else. So Minnie Miñoso and Buck O'Neil talk coming up in just a minute. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and keep it Locked On Dodgers. Hey, does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. All right, we're back. We're going to talk about Buck O'Neil and Minnie Miñoso. Buck O'Neil is one that I'm really excited about. I didn't know much about Buck O'Neil until I read a book by Joe Posnanski. It's called The Soul of Baseball. It is my favorite book. Not just my favorite baseball book. It is my favorite book. It basically Joe Posnanski, who is an outstanding writer. He traveled the country with Buck O'Neil for a month or two, and he wrote about it. And so it's a book. It's about baseball. It's about Buck O'Neil. It's also just about life. It's just an outstanding book. And because of that, I've had this fondness for Buck O'Neil. And a lot of people were heartbroken when Buck O'Neil, he had one shot at election shortly before he died, and he didn't make it, and he was devastated, and a lot of people were devastated for him, and then he passed away. And so this is a case, we're seeing the push with Oliva and Catt to get guys in while they're alive. Buck O'Neil's a big part of that reason. And, Ron Santo, a decade or so ago, got elected the year after he died. I mentioned Dick Allen didn't get elected while he was alive. I think the committees kind of made a push to elect guys while they're living. And part of that is because of Buck O'Neil, because everybody who has ever experienced Buck O'Neil loves Buck O'Neil. And so my only real connection to him is that book, The Soul of Baseball by Joe Posnanski. But I strongly recommend you read it. If you like baseball, or if you like Buck O'Neil, or if you like life, you're going to like this book. It is awesome. My wife and daughter both read it. Neither of them, they like baseball. They have to live with me, but they're not obsessed like I am. And yet they both loved the book. So check it out. Soul of Baseball by Joe Posnanski. And congratulations to the millions of people who are happy that Buck O'Neil was finally elected to the Hall of Fame, because he's been a Hall of Famer in a lot of people's minds for a long time. And then the last one I talk about is Minnie Miñoso. Or is it Miñoso? We'll talk about that in a minute. Minnie Miñoso was a great player with the White Sox. I played shortly in the Negro Leagues and then played with the White Sox for a long time. And when I say a long time, I mean a long time. Minnie Miñoso is the only player in history to play professional baseball in 7 different decades, including 5 decades in the big leagues. He played in the 40s, 50s, and 60s in the big leagues as a legitimate big leaguer. And then he had publicity stunt appearances in the 80s and 90s with the White Sox. And then in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And then in the 70s and 80s with the White Sox. And then in the 90s and 2000s, I believe, in minor league ball with the St. Paul Saints, I think. So he made professional baseball appearances in 7 different decades. And when he was an actual major leaguer, he was a great hitter. He was extremely fast. He was nicknamed the Cuban Comet. And some people say that the reason that Mickey Mantle was eventually nicknamed the Commerce Comet was because his speed reminded them of Minnie Miñoso's speed. And so, that tells you what you need to know about how fast he was, because Mickey Mantle was crazy fast. So Minnie Miñoso, by all accounts, he's another one of those guys who you just kind of assume he's probably in the Hall of Fame. I definitely know that name. And he hasn't been until now, which is kind of crazy. Very, very deserving, just outstanding election. But I've seen a lot of people, making the point on social media and stuff that his name is Orestes Miñoso, not Minnie. And I'm sensitive to that because, talking about Dick Allen, for a lot of his career, he was called Richie Allen. He didn't like it, but people liked that. People made that decision for him. Roberto Clemente, a bunch of his baseball cards call him Bob Clemente. Announcers used to call him Robbie Clemente. just trying to anglicize his name. That there's a long history in baseball, especially with non-white players, of basically white men trying to decide what they're going to be called. And so I wanted to do a little research to see if I could figure out if Minnie Miñoso liked the name Minnie. First, I guess I'll talk about the pronunciation of his last name, whether it's Miñoso or Miñoso. And that's a tricky one. I think it probably is Miñoso. He was known throughout his career as Miñoso, and maybe some of that was because of the nickname Minnie, and so Minnie Miñoso kind of flows better than Minnie Miñoso. But so yeah, he was called Miñoso throughout his career, but I think it's supposed to be pronounced Miñoso. So I'm going to do my best to try to do that. It's just in the last several years that a lot of places have started including the tilde above the N in his last name. And so it seems like that's probably the correct pronunciation, even though it wasn't really used at all during his career. And as for his first name, I'm just pulling up some research I did, and I did that seamlessly. So of course you didn't even notice a little blip in the video. I basically did a search of newspaper archives trying to figure out, did Minnie Miñoso like the nickname Minnie? Minnie Miñoso like the nickname Minnie. And I found an article from the Spokesman Review from Spokane, Washington, October 26, 1952, a little blurb with a little headline of "Here's why Miñoso likes Minnie as nickname." I thought, great, this is exactly what I'm looking for. It's one sentence long, and it says, "Any wonder Orestes Miñoso prefers Minnie as a nickname? The correct full name of the Chicago White Sox star is Saturnino Orestes Arrieta Miñoso, or Miñoso." There's no tilde in the newspaper. But so basically, what this article, I guess, is saying is the reason that Minnie Miñoso likes the nickname Minnie is because his full name is hard for me, a white man, to say. So congratulations. Looks like that may have come from the Chicago Tribune and just been reprinted here. But that was not enough for me. Having a newspaper claim that he likes it because his real name is clunky. It's kind of funny. It's kind of a pattern. The next one, from July 18th, 1954, the Tribune in Coshocton, Ohio, says headline writers liked the nickname of Minnie Miñoso. Otherwise, they'd have to contend with Saturnino Orestes Armas Miñoso. So again, it's, hey, this is easier for us white people to say and write. And so that's what we're going with. You may notice that full name was different than the last one. This one said Saturnino Orestes Armas Miñoso, and the other one said Saturnino Orestes Arrieta Miñoso. Interestingly, his mom's last name was Arrieta, his dad's was Armas, but his mom had 4 kids from a previous marriage whose last names were Miñoso. And as a child, just over the years, people started calling Orestes Miñoso, just kind of assuming that he had the same last name as his siblings. And then when he became a U.S. citizen or U.S. resident or whatever, he officially changed his last name to Miñoso from Armas. And so, but it's kind of funny that both of these articles mention his first name Saturnino as if his first name that he doesn't go by being hard to pronounce means anything. It's not like we go around calling Zach Greinke Donald Zachary Greinke. If he goes by Orestes, you never need to say Saturnino. So, and it's not like Orestes is that hard to write. So it's kind of silly. Very clearly, again, the case of that white people trying to impose names onto non-white people, unfortunately. But I did find one quote actually from Minnie Miñoso from the Alabama Tribune in Montgomery, Alabama, July 16th, 1954, talking about an article. So this is a newspaper article about a different article, and it's about Minnie Miñoso. And this article says, originally the article said, Miñoso did not like the nickname Minnie, but now he accepts it. Here's his opinion of the nickname. And it's a quote from Minnie Miñoso, and you'll see, I'm going to read it exactly as it's written in the newspaper, and you'll see another thing that was common at the time of sports writers basically quoting players verbatim, even if English isn't their first language. And so there's a lot of broken English, and it's I don't think they intended to be racist about it, but it very clearly has the effect of, just remember, these people aren't as smart as we are. Whereas these days, either the player would be talking through an interpreter, or the reporters would do them the courtesy of basically writing, fixing the grammar, or at least, I'm just going to read this directly as it is in the newspaper, and you'll see what I mean. So when somebody asked Minnie Miñoso what he thought of the nickname Minnie, he said, "I think that lady's name, and I know like. In Cuba, everybody used to call me Orestes. Now everybody in Cuba and United States call me Minnie, so I no mind." These days, that would have been written, "I think that's a lady's name, and I don't like it. In Cuba, everybody used to call me Orestes. Now everybody in Cuba and the United States calls me Minnie, so I don't mind." It's the same quote. It's just not designed to make him look dumb. But regardless of that, we do have one quote from Minnie Miñoso saying he doesn't mind the nickname Minnie. And so at that point, he said didn't like it at first, but he doesn't mind it now. And that's early in his career. So until I find something more definitive than that, I feel okay calling him Minnie Miñoso with the tilde. That's what I'm going to try to do. And whatever you call him to the Hall of Fame, because that's where he's going. So congratulations to his family. Congratulations to the families of all the Hall of Famers. Obviously, congratulations to Jim Catt and Tony Oliva, who are currently still alive to enjoy this. Hopefully they're still alive in July when the ceremony happens. It may just be the 6 of them. I see a lot of people saying that maybe this is going to be a shutout from the baseball writers this year. I personally think David Ortiz is going to get elected, but who knows? We'll see. Maybe they'll elect Curt Schilling just to bug him because he didn't even want to be on the ballot again, but probably not. But I do think David Ortiz will probably get elected. But in any case, we'll have at least 6 inductees, and hopefully at least 2 who can stand up there and give a speech, because that would be great for them and for everybody. So congratulations to them. Thank you all. I'm going to wrap up my part. Vince will be along to do his in a minute. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. And Vince will be along in a minute.
Holiday season. Grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or even better than a candy bar. Built Bar is filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, but high in protein. You get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. They've got so many flavors you have a hard time choosing, but what's more fun than getting to choose what you want? Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. And because it's a season of peace and love, don't bring up your favorite Built Bar flavor at family parties, because people are so passionate about their favorite flavor, they'll fight for it and things could get out of hand. If you're friends with Santa, well, tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in those stockings. With so many flavors, they'd make anyone's Christmas morning a happy one. So you want to cozy up with something warm, here's a holiday secret. Dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of hot cocoa. Let it melt and give your beverage a bit of that Built Bar flavor. Perfect for any Christmas or holiday night. Like some of those marshmallowy treats around the holidays, where you need to get your hands on Built Bar Puffs. They're light, fluffy, and marshmallowy through and through. So right now, go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Yo, Dodger fans. Vince Samperio here to take us to the end of this episode. No real other news other than the Hall of Fame news Jeff talked about earlier. So I'm going to take on a question or two here that we had still left over from last week. First one I'm going to take is from Tom at Gallon Don't. He says, what do you think a Trea Turner extension would look like? And it's interesting because, we just saw a few shortstops. We've seen shortstops get paid the last couple of years, and Trea Turner's up there with those shortstops, just as good, just as young, and, a guy that probably deserves $300 million. So we've seen Lindor get $341 million. Saw Tatis get $340 million. Saw Seager get $325 million. I'm sure Correa's going to get over $300 million. So you got to imagine that a Trea Turner extension starts at $300 million or somewhere around there. It doesn't appear. Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like he fell in love with Los Angeles and was like, oh yeah, I will be willing to play here for a little bit less. The other part that gets brought up a lot when the Dodgers, end up losing someone to free agency, or the thought of losing someone to free agency, is taxes. He can go to a few other places, pay less taxes, and the Dodgers could offer him way more money, but at the end of the day, he'd be taking home less because of the taxes in California. So I think any starting point with Trea Turner is $300 million if you're willing to go the 10 years, which, the Dodgers, I don't know. He'll be 29 next year. He'll be 30 when that extension starts. So a 10-year extension puts him into age 39, 40, which, I don't know. Is that something you want to do? I don't know. But, we haven't really seen what the Dodgers offered Seager. We do know that they, obviously we're behind the Rangers, but we haven't really heard or seen what they offered Seager. Did they offer him 10 years, just less money? Did they offer him, 5 to 7 years, but higher and average annual value? I don't know what their case was, and everybody's different. Seager maybe wants to play 10 more years. Does Trea Turner want to play 10 more years? I don't know. So you got to imagine an average, $32.5 million what Seager got per year. You got to imagine that Trea Turner is going to be in that $30 to $35 million range. It just depends on length of contract. Maybe the Dodgers try to get it up to 5 years, $200 million. And try to get them that way with $40 million a year. And that's something they might do. There's another question in here. I'll just combine this one now. He had a handful of questions, but I'm going to take one of them. Abel in Vegas, at Abel in Vegas, he said, will the Dodgers sign Trea Turner long term? Is there a shortstop prospect that can be called up in lieu of signing Turner? So as of right now, the Dodgers don't really have a shortstop in the wing, shortstop in waiting. I mean, technically, Gavin Lux would be that shortstop in waiting. And they do have a second baseman coming up, Michael Busch, which theoretically could leave Gavin Lux a shortstop. But, we don't know what Gavin Lux is yet. He's come up and had some hot spurts. He's had some bad spurts. He came up last year at the end of the year and had a really good spurt. And then, is that the real Gavin Lux? Is everything else we've seen the real Gavin Lux? Is it somewhere in the middle? Because if it's the Gavin Lux we saw in September, that's a guy that can possibly be, an all-star. If it's the Gavin Lux we've seen other times, that's a guy that's probably not an everyday starter. If it's somewhere in between, that's a guy that's an everyday starter, but, probably not going to make any all-star teams or anything like that. So it just depends what the Dodgers want. There's no shortstops really coming up. The next shortstop, that all their shortstops are young right now. They got guys, Wilman Diaz, they got Jacob Amaya, but he's probably not an everyday player type. But they got Wilman Diaz, they got Leonel Valera, and they got Alex De Jesus, and they're all 22 or younger, with two of them being 19, I think, with Wilman's 18 and De Jesus is 19. So that's why I'm saying maybe, 5 to 7 years, 35, 40 mil AAV could be something that sways Trea Turner. I don't know. Like I said, without knowing his thought process, 5 years, 200 mil, 7 years, 280 mil. Does that get Trea Turner long-term with the Dodgers? That's something that would be intriguing to me because, like I said, if some of these players end up panning out, they'll be ready in 3, 4, 5 years, which would be around the time that his deal would be either ending or close to ending. We know he can play second base if they ever need to move him. We know in a pinch he can play outfield if you ever really needed to move him. But you would imagine, not knowing, but assuming Trea Turner wants to be a shortstop, that's definitely something he would ask, or if they do negotiate long term, I'm sure he'd be like, I want to be a shortstop and I want some kind of assurance that you guys aren't going to go out and get somebody that plays shortstop and moves me somewhere else, which is fair for him to ask for because there'll be probably plenty of other teams that are willing to give him that assurance that he'll always be a shortstop. So yeah, speaking on not knowing much right now, I would imagine that, like I said, 10 years, 300 plus mil, easy for sure. Probably get some 5 to 7 years, 40 mil a year. Could get him, could be what the Dodgers want. I don't know if the Dodgers go 10 years with anyone. They've already done so with Mookie. I don't know if they go 10 years with anyone else. Trea Turner would be, a solid candidate to go those 10 years. He's so fast that even if he loses some of that speed later on, he'll still be probably faster than most of Major League Baseball. He'll still be an asset on the base paths. But it's a matter of, what the Dodgers want to do and what Trea Turner wants. There was reports that he wouldn't want to stay on the West Coast. I don't know if that's true or not. It would depend where, consider the source, consider where it came from. But yeah, without any shortstops in the pipeline and with most of the big shortstops becoming free agents this offseason, I think the Dodgers have to push hard for Trea Turner. I would love for them to get an extension done before the season ends, just because it's a lot easier to negotiate against yourself than it is against, 29 other teams, and some of those other teams being a little bit more desperate to spend money than the Dodgers may be. We've seen it with Zach Greinke, that didn't end up working out an extension. Zach Greinke left for a lot more money than maybe the Dodgers could have got him for cheaper. Seager, I don't know if the Dodgers could have got him for that much cheaper, but they maybe could have gotten a little bit cheaper if they had offered him, 10 years, 300 mil. I don't know, but that probably wasn't something discussed, or Seager just wanted to hit free agency. So without knowing Trea Turner's mindset, without knowing the Dodgers' mindset right now, I'd say a 5 to 7 year deal, 40 mil a year is what they're going to offer. And it's just a matter if that's what Trea Turner wants, or if there's another team that's going to be out there that gives him, 10 years, 300 plus mil, and gives him those extra years of assurance and good money. So that's what I would say for a Trea Turner extension. I'm sure we'll hear more once the lockout ends. Maybe we'll hear more that the Dodgers are talking about it or discussing it, or maybe not. Maybe he just wants to play through the season, get to free agency. Every guy's a little bit different, and we're just gonna have to wait and see. And that's all we can really do. But I think it would be imperative for the Dodgers to lock down a shortstop. Now, if Gavin Lux has an all-star year and Trea Turner is still really good, still MVP candidate type, with the Dodgers, maybe let him walk or maybe offer a little bit less because they know they have Gavin Lux. That's something that remains to be seen as well. But we're going to have to see that from Lux before we even think about not offering Trea Turner as much money as he should possibly get or need. So that's all I got for today. Still got a lot more questions we'll get into. We'll still got a few other things to talk about. That's what we got coming the rest of the week. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every morning. Make sure to check out Locked On Bets for your second listen every morning. Your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is free and available on all platforms. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for continuing to support. If you're new, thank you for starting to support. We're here every weekday morning. We hope you'll be with us when you get in your car, or if you're at home. Tell your smart device, play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.